All right, that's my cue. It's 11 a.m. and it is time for us to get started with today's webinar. So first of all, welcome to all of you. Thank you so much for joining us on behalf of David's entire team. We just genuinely want to thank you for taking the time to spend with us here this morning. As many of you may know, David has more than 40 years of experience as a family therapist, workshop facilitator, speaker, lecturer, and advisor to leadership executives from all over the world. He's dedicated his life to helping others live more authentically and creating more authentic organizations. He's a best-selling author and respected thought leader in the leadership community. David is so passionate about helping people connect with the most authentic versions of themselves and seeing the world transform one authentic person at a time. Whether he's leading the academy, speaking in front of a crowd, or speaking through his written words, David is fulfilled and passionate about the work that he does. Today, David is going to take us on a journey, as he does, and share his perspective on unleashing potential through the power of accountability. This webinar will be recorded and we will be sharing it on David's YouTube channel, where we do share all of the recorded webinars if you want to go back and watch any of them. So thank you again for joining us. We're really looking forward to this time together and always inspired to see so many leaders logging on, joining us, and committed to learning and growing and showing up as the most authentic versions of themselves. So without further ado, David will take us on this journey.
Thank you, Kristen. It is always so good to have you here. You make such a difference, and you're certainly one of the accountable people on our team. And we're going to talk about what it's like to be around accountable people today, and it is totally inspiring, and your energy is very much contagious. So thanks for showing up. And one of my messages today is how we show up actually matters. Folks, thank you for showing up today. Thank you for taking the time to be with me for this hour and a half. Here's how it works. I'm going to talk for somewhere between 50 and 60 minutes. I'll get you engaged a little bit in some of the conversations as I go through, but it's primarily on me for the first hour. If you can stay around afterwards, then I turn off the cameras. I turn off the slides. We turn off the recording, and we just have a dialogue for half an hour. If you can stay. It's 11 o'clock here Mountain Time. If you can stay on the hour for an extra half an hour, I'll be here for 90 minutes and would welcome an opportunity. Some people tell me that last half an hour of dialogue and questions and answers and sharing and accessing the wisdom of the group is actually the best part of the whole webinar. But we do this each month, and I'm just grateful that you would take the time to be here, and it truly means a lot to me. So I'm going to start with, we're going to talk about accountability. Accountability is one of those words that everybody talks about it. Kids should be more accountable. Teachers should be more accountable. Politicians should be more accountable. We all talk about accountability as if we understand what we're talking about. And I'm going to suggest that we might think we know what we're talking about, but I don't know that we do. So I'm going to talk about accountability as an approach to living and leading that can transform your life and change the world. This isn't just a check the box activity. It's not just about punishing people. It's not a performance management system, even though you can use it as that. What it really is it's a philosophy of life, and it's the foundation of your life. And it is very personal to me. I can tell you for the first 15 years of my adult life, in the first 50, and essentially the first 10 years of my career, my life was quite unmanageable. I was in and out of relationships. I had severe mood swings. I allowed myself to get into the grips of an addiction. I was in severe debt, enormous debt. And I just was really unhappy. And the paradox in it all is that I was teaching people about how to have a happy life. And but I wasn't integrated into this. And it wasn't until I really hit my rock bottom in the mid-90s, and I began to actually understand what my parents had planted years ago in me, but it really never became integrated until I started to actually teach it and actually integrate it into my life. So it's very personal. This might be a bit grandiose to think that we can change the world with this, but that's the only way I think we can change the world, is to change ourselves. That's the premise that I work from. And it has really made a difference in my own personal life. And so you're going to really get my philosophy, but also the process for managing expectations in a pretty practical way inside of your teams. And you can apply this to your family, you can apply it to your teams, you can apply it to yourself, if nothing else. So if we look at accountability as one of those things, folks, that's not really very sexy. I don't think anybody wants on their headstone that they, when they die, they got all their emails returned or they were accountable. No, accountability is like the roots of a tree. And as we understand, it's not the fierceness of the storm that determines whether we break, but rather the depth and the strength of the roots. So accountability is one of those things that you don't necessarily really see in the world. It's like character. You don't really see it like you do the fruits. It's not, but you can't have the fruits. You can't have the tree without strong roots. And what we're really talking about here is the foundation, the roots of your life. I have never in my lifetime been seen the world with the storms, political storms, as we're seeing around the planet right now. And I always say, I can't control that. I can't control the weather. I can't control politics. I'm not this is not going to be a political conversation, but I know that it's a very unsettling time for many of us on this call. We got people from around the world. I know we've got some people from Australia on this call today, which is very early for you. So we have a lot of instability in the world. And what I know is what I can do today is at least deepen and strengthen my roots. I can't control the storms in life, but I can deepen and control the roots. And that's really what this philosophy is all about. First thing I want to do, and I'm going to actually get you engaged in this, and Kristen, I'll get your help with this. What I want you to do is that I want you to just write in the chat room, what are the indicators of a lack of accountability that you see in your world? Could be on your team, it could be in your family, it could be in society, wherever you see a lack of accountability, however you define accountability, just jot it in the chat room. What would be some of the indicators that you would see that would actually have fueled your desire to be here? Kristen, can you catch some of those in the chat room for us?
Yeah, you bet. We've got deflection, excuses, blaming others, blame, a lot of blame, and deflecting, ignoring things, breakdown of systems, overpromising, under-delivering, people just simply not doing what they say they're going to do, gaslighting, denial, apathy, defensiveness, missing deadlines, being selfish, lack of productivity, not being satisfied, not owning up to mistakes, anonymity, and that's a tough word for me to say. Anonymity. There we go. I think I got it.
There you go.
Yeah, sick time, forgetting details, weak commitments. So lots of indicators there.
Thanks, Kristen. And thank you all for jumping in and participating here. So this is a crisis in our world today. There's no question that we see this. I have my own indicators of a lack of accountability, which really is a summary of what we've all said here: a disengagement from people, missed deadlines, inefficiency, a blame culture, poor quality work, high turnover rates. So here's what my premise is. How many of you looked at other people when you made that list? It's so easy. As Oscar Wilde said, responsibility is what we expect from somebody else. And so it resists that tendency. And by the way, I'm going to use the word responsibility and accountability interchangeably. They are really actually quite distinct, but just for simplicity's sakes, we're going to keep them synonymous today. And how many of us, how easy it is to be frustrated when someone didn't meet a deadline for us. Hey, when do we get frustrated with ourselves for over-promising and under-delivering? How many of us really looked in the mirror when we came up with that list? It's very easy. I'm not saying that there isn't a list out there of other people, but it's very easy, much easier to see it in other people. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you 4 steps to unleash potential through accountability. And what I hope you can apply this to any team that you're on, your family and your team at work, or yourself. And what I hope is that you'll catch yourself doing it right here, and you'll catch yourself, oh yeah, we're doing that. And you'll also see when you see a breakdown in results, what I hope that you'll also see is to say, where are some areas that I need to step this up? And again, it's so easy to point the finger to say somebody, every one of you are going to think of somebody that you think needs to hear this presentation. And I want you to resist the human tendency to point your finger and actually look within it yourself and say, what do I need to do to be more accountable? I always say it's the law of the echo. Whatever you want in an organization, give it. So if you want more accountability, be more accountable. So first thing we're going to do is understand accountability. And again, I'm going to walk you through this, but you can take any of this material and walk through this material with your teams. Understand accountability. So first of all, you're going to get the philosophy. You've got to have a reason to be accountable. People who aren't accountable often don't have a reason to be accountable. And then you have a process, which is a method for getting a grip on results. It's a method for managing expectations in a relationship. But we all want hot tips of how we can get people to keep their promises. But you've got to get the philosophy first to build on that. Then we're going to talk about 3 critical shifts that have to take place in a relationship, certainly in work, in a family, in order to really foster a culture of accountability. And then I'm going to talk about what I call the accountability process and the alignment process. There's 2 individual processes. So individual accountability, and then how do you get a team aligned around their agreements? And no matter what, folks, you still have to, even if you're living in a culture that's not, in an environment that's not accountable, you still got to take accountability to make today matter, no matter what. So you can apply this to yourself or your team. All right. So again, anybody's heard my presentation before knows that accountability is the ability to be counted on. Okay. You can't build a reputation on what you're going to do. Henry Ford. So make a list of the people in your life that you can count on just for a moment. Now, again, if we had, a day to do this workshop, you could do this, but just in your own mind, pick 2 or 3 people that you can count on. There are people on this call that would be on my list. Kristen be on my list. My vice president of client care, Mark Barr, be on this list. My good friend, Jim Rieger, he'd be on this list. He's inspired me a great deal in the area of accountability. I got a good friend here, Gord, who I've just gotten to know over these last couple of months. We've been on a committee together on a nonprofit group in our community. Accountable, shows up, does what's it like to be around these people? What's it like to be around people that you can count on? And think about that. And you could actually put that in the chat. We won't have Kristen read these, but just you could actually reflect in the chat room. What's it like to be around accountable people? Reflect on ways that you want to consider showing greater appreciation for these people in your life. What I always say is you don't build accountability with a stick. You don't walk around and beat people into being accountable. What you do is shine a light on what accountability is expressed in your organization, and tell the story and share with people what it's like. And so take good care of your accountable people in your life. I've had people tell me that after the webinar, they pick up the phone and call somebody or visit somebody and say, I just want you to know you're on my list. Now, you might want to let them know what list they're on, but let people know how much you appreciate the fact that you can count on them. It is not a small thing. Now consider whose list would you have earned the right to be on? If the people around you were to do this list, would you be on their list? And I'm going to ask another question here. Would you be on your own list? Can you count on yourself to keep promises? Okay, here's my premise. And this is what I spend probably 20 hours a week working in the addictions field. And what I learn is this: when you honor your agreements, what people are suffering from who are held in the grips of an addiction is they're recovering their integrity. Because when you don't keep your promises, you don't have integrity. And what I mean by keeping promises is you can't have, you see, if you email somebody and say, I'd like this done by as soon as possible. Well, we don't know what ASAP means. It could mean something different for me than it means for you. So we got to nail down exactly, and you can't have accountability unless you actually have an agreement. If people don't respond to you, you can't really say they're unaccountable, because unless there's an agreement that you're going to get a response. And so we need to take responsibility to follow up. And then it may be this is a person that you can't count on, but whenever we make a promise and we don't keep that promise, then we have a breach in integrity. And so it's as simple as making a promise to yourself to get up and exercise in the morning. We've all had some kind, I'm not saying you have to exercise to have accountability, but if you're going to make a promise to get up and exercise, make sure that you fulfill that promise. We all understand, we've all had the experience of just, saying, oh, my dad would say it's mind over mattress when the alarm goes off. We've all had the experience of just turning the alarm off and just going and go back to sleep. How do you feel about yourself an hour from now? Versus when you get up, whether you feel like it or not, you go for that walk, you get to the gym, you do what you've promised. How do you feel an hour from now? You have self-respect. Whenever you have integrity in your life, it earns self-respect, which earns respect from others, which is increasing energy. I think you could all probably, what you would all tell me, that you have increased energy by being around people who are accountable. When you don't have to, it takes energy to manage expectations with unaccountable people. Okay. As my mentor, Steve Covey, used to say, a private victory precedes a public victory. Do something hard early in the day. Make a promise, and by the way, if you don't want to get up, if you need the sleep more than you need the exercise, keep your integrity and sleep in. But when you make a promise the night before, make that promise very carefully. Make it very, do I really need to, am I committed to getting up and exercising, or do I need to sleep? Keep your integrity by keeping your promise. And be very careful about the promises that you make. And don't ever make a promise that you don't intend to keep. You act your way into right feelings. You don't feel your way into right actions. And this is where I really feel that can be a philosophy that can actually improve our mental health in our world today, because we're conditioned to listen to our feelings. Now, we're much more attuned to our feelings than we were 2-3 generations ago. But just because you have emotions, you don't put those emotions in the driver's seat. It's like if you have a baby in the back seat of your car, you stop the car and attend to the baby's feelings, but you don't put the baby in the driver's seat. If you want to feel differently, act differently. If you have a kid in your life, for example, 13-year-old who says, I don't have the confidence to play basketball. Well, you're not going to think your way into confidence. You play your way into confidence. You get into the game, step into it. Whatever you're feeling, if you don't feel like going to work, if you don't feel like getting up, if you don't feel like exercising, but you've made a promise to do that, take the action and the feelings will follow you. If you want higher self-respect, don't do what's easy, do what you agreed to. Don't ever make a promise you don't intend to keep. And when you make a promise, scrupulously keep that promise. Okay? This is being an integrated person. So these are the 10 facets of you can work with this today. These are the 10 facets that I find are important in a person's life. Now, not all these facets are going to be equally important to you at every stage of your life. Just reflect on these stages, on these facets, and ask yourself, what would be your highest 3 priorities? And then ask yourself, how much are you attending to that priority? You might espouse that to be important. You might claim that that's important, but if you're not attending to it, then we call that an integrity gap. You say it's important to yourself. Maybe I need to take better care of my health. And you're not keeping those agreements and the way that you close an integrity gap. We all have integrity gaps in our life, but if you're not actively pursuing closing those integrity gaps, you will see a preponderance of self-respect. You will see a lack of self-respect whenever you have an integrity gap in your life. And what we find here is that if you want to improve your life, all you have to do is improve any area in your life. You're going to have a hard time. If you improve any area in your life, it will improve every area. We are one indivisible whole. We are not compartment. You can't be a wreck in your life and expect that you can come to work. If your personal relationships are in shatters, you can't come to work and expect yourself to be a good leader. It's going to permeate. If you're struggling with a lot of debt right now, if you're under a lot of stress right now, and you want to come and be a good leader, that's going to impact your leader, whether your leadership, whether you recognize it or not. Everything impacts everything. And it wasn't until I began to realize this that I began to really say, what really matters in your life and where do you want to put some focus? So you might take one or two of those areas to say, you know what, there's the biggest gap for me. And I'm going to close that gap. And the way you close a gap is to make an agreement with yourself and then follow through on that agreement. So what does accountability look like here? And this is a brainstorming session. And so this is the first thing that I would say with your team. And this is something you can start right after this webinar. You can go back or schedule a team meeting and take 10 minutes. And with your team, express what does accountability look like here. And this is something you could actually put in the chat room as well. What does accountability look like for you? What is your vision of an accountable person? Now, these are the typical, by the way, you can do this with your family. This is what we did in my family growing up. We actually sat down when I was a teenager. We crafted, this is my family's version of a drafted, what does it look like to be accountable? We have a charter of rights. And by the way, the kids came up with the rights, right? You have the right to feel, to disagree, to offer your opinion, decide your own bedtime, designer clothes. I never remember having a bedtime growing up. Designer clothes, clean clothes, use of the car. That's what the kids put down. Now the parents, we just failed you here. Just a second. I have to start again. My slideshow collapsed on me here. Hang on a second, folks. Oh, shoot. How do I get back here? Bear with me. You can see that, Kristen?
We can, you betcha.
Okay, good. So there's what the kids came up with. Now, on the other side is what my parents came up with, right? Do so respectfully and then get your chores done. Act humanely to people the next day. Show up and get your chores and your schoolwork done. There's the chores again. Pay for them yourself. I'd never forget a father I was counseling years ago who said, whose 16-year-old turned to him and said, it's my right to Calvin Klein jeans. And this guy turned to his daughter and said, listen, kid, it's my job to cover your rear end, not decorate it. So anyway, pay for it, wash them for yourself. I don't remember growing up my mother washing one stitch of clothes for us as long as I was tall enough to turn on the washing machine. And that's when we started to wash clothes for ourselves. When it's available, use the car when it's available, bring it back cleaner, full of gas, and in better condition than when you took it. So that's what we call a charter of rights with an accompanying responsibilities. Now, I have to tell you, we were raised with strong accountable values, but they never really took root until I began to teach this stuff. There's no better way to learn it than to teach it. So here's a typical list that you might find that your team brainstorms. It's a get or done attitude. You deliver results. You take initiative rather than waiting. You're reliable. You keep your promises. You show up on time. See it, own it, solve it. Focus on solutions. Show loyalty in people's absence. You don't gossip. It's my responsibility. Flexible and curious. We bloom where we're planted. We don't complain, we bloom. let's go of the past, and you bring an attitude of gratitude to the team. So these are a set of sample examples when you brainstorm with your team and you create a culture of accountable, of at least an accountable mindset. And then what you do is you turn these qualities into behaviors. And again, I'm teaching you a little process here that you can use with your team. You can be a team of 2, or you can be a team of 10, or you can be a team of 1 if you're it. But turn those qualities into behaviors, and turn those behaviors into agreements. The agreements are what nail the accountability. It's the power of an agreement. Just because they're on the wall doesn't mean that you make an agreement. It means I am going to agree to do these. And then you talk about, what do we do when we fail our agreements? We're all going to be human. How do we deal with that? And you have a conversation about that. And what we do is that we hire for those qualities. I'm going to tell you right now, it's a whole lot easier to hire for accountability than it is to train for accountability. I'm not sure that that's a quality that you can foster it, but if people don't come to the workplace with an accountable mindset, the simple thing to do is to make sure that you hire for those qualities. What is your hiring process to make sure that you hire people that have those attitudes? Reinforce. And by the way, you can apply this process to any value. I'm just applying it to accountability because that's the topic of the webinar today. You reinforce it with a light. You tell the stories in the meetings. I learned this from the best cultures I've worked with. Never start an operational meeting without a story. Where does somebody exhibit those qualities? And so you foster it with a light, and you shine a light on the success that you're looking for. And then you can turn this into another, take it to the next step, which is, this is the victim box, where people don't respond accountably, versus the ownership, where which is where you're leading. And that what you do is that you build what we call a team charter, where you have agreements to each other, and you manage this agreements that when we get into the victim box, we are going to tell each other that we're in the victim box, and we agree on a process. So it's not up to the boss to nail everybody. It's up to the whole culture. And you begin to have a culture of accountability. And you begin to say, is there anybody here that would argue with this culture? Do we want a culture of accountability? And what are we committed to do to make that happen? Now, Jim Rieger on this call gave me this little graph, and where you assess your team. You assess the people on your team where you have high skills and you have high attitude. And what we find is that, and by the way, think of the people that you have on your team right now and ask yourself, pick a person on your team. If you could do it all over again, would you rehire them? Do they help diminish your stress? Accountable people will help you take your stress away. How would you feel if they quit? What if people in your organization, what if everyone in your organization was just like this person? And you begin to take an inventory of the people on your team to assess where their level of accountability is. Now, people who have high skills and a bad attitude are what we call attitude challenged, versus a person who has a good attitude, the right attitude, and good skills. We call those role models. And you do not want to take your role models for granted, and let your role models know they are role models and they are an important part, and make sure those role models get looked after and attended to, because they tend to kind of hide and don't really need to be affirmed, but take good care of those. And then potential role models, where you connect your role models with potential role models. And then you have energy consumers. They are the folks that are going to consume your energy. Now, why do they, by the way, your attitude challenge are what we call competent jerks, and we need to attend to the attitude with those folks. And typically what we do is we hire for skills and fire for attitude. But I'm going to tell you, we got to attend. This is what we expect, but it's not up to necessarily the boss. The whole culture creates a team that says, you know what, it's the wrong value here. And I can tell you story after story where I've helped executives craft value statements. And then we put them on the wall, and we think that's the end of the process. And that's the beginning. And then my question is, what's your process for holding each other accountable for living those values. And I still remember, some of you have heard this story that I like to tell. We had an executive team and we put respect, which I'm not even sure whether you should have respect on your value. You shouldn't even work anywhere if you don't have respect for people, but it was one of their top values. And then I said, well, how are you going to hold each other accountable for living that value? And all the heads went down on the executive team. And I said, what's the deal? And they says, well, what about Don? And I said, what about Don? He says, well, he looks after all our sales department, and he's the most disrespectful guy. And I says, well, why are you keeping him there? And I said, well, we can't fire him because he brings in more than all the rest of the sales team combined. And I says, well, you don't have to fire him, but you know what? You take that respect, see that respect, that nice calligraphy respect that you have on the wall, put a line through it and put the word profit, because you don't really value, because values aren't something that you espouse. Values are something that you do. This is how you act. And why don't you, instead of lying to people, just tell people. And then you come in if you're hiring somebody, says, we don't respect people around here, but if you can make us money, you'll have a place in our organization. We'll reward you. We'll take good care of you. Let's just be honest with people so that people don't expect you to be respectful. Well, when they began to look at this and they understood, no, we need to fire this guy. We need to show the organization. You know what happened to the whole sales team is everybody stepped up. Everybody said, you know what? These leaders are actually living what they're preaching. This isn't just values on the wall. And it changed the whole culture when you take action and there's consequences for this. But again, you create a whole culture that keeps people out of this. Now, again, the energy consumers, what we know about energy consumers is most of the time, I'm going to say 90% of the time, they're just in the wrong fit, that they're in the wrong job. And that's when we need to coach them to move on. Forget about trying to fix anybody. This is about fitting, not fixing. It's a bad investment of your time to try to fix somebody. And that's why it consumes your energy, because you're trying to make them into a person that they simply aren't. Now, what I want to do is talk about the 3 critical shifts. And then I do want to spend the last 15 minutes on the practical process. We're going to go through these shifts relatively quickly. Some of you have heard me share these shifts. First of all, the shift between transaction and transformational. There's a difference between a boss and a leader. And we get into this in much more detail in my leadership programs. It's the difference between a father and a dad, between a mother and mom. What's the difference? If you can identify, we all have to sometimes step in and be the father, step in and say, you know what, I'm the boss here. But accountability is not built on just being the boss. It's not just transactional. Now, we're not going to go through this list into a great detail. All I want you to do is understand this is what bosses do. There's a transactional side of your work, and there's a transformational. And all I'm suggesting here is that you can't expect to build accountability strictly on the transactional side. Yes, sometimes you have to toe the line and you have to be firm with yourself and with the people around you. But if that's all you do, you are going to lose credibility. And my point is, accountability is relational. It has to be put in the context of a person who cares. And connect before you expect. We all understand this. Any parent on this call, or any aunt or uncle that's had kids in your life, if you just harp on kids for not doing their homework, no kid will, and no employee will step up and say, oh, thanks for harping on me. I'm going to be accountable. This is our natural tendency, is to get harder on people. And you always want to ask yourself, where's the relationship? When I did family therapy, I would always ask people that, if they were dealing with a kid that was unaccountable and not taking responsibility, I would always ask them, what are you doing to spend time with that kid when you're not expecting them anything from them? And you can tell a real troubled family because the answer was 0. It's all harping and pushing. This is not the way to build accountability. The other shift that you want to make is this shift from a parent to a child, a parent to an adult-to-adult relationship. And many of you have heard my philosophy around this. We have historically in organizations an outdated, what I call a parental employment contract. Play nice and we'll take care of you. And what that looks like, if you do as you're told, allow yourself to be supervised, score high on your performance evaluation, be available 24/7, do your job plus somebody else. We'll give you job security until we can't. We'll give you a competitive salary. We'll give you an evaluation of how pleased we are with you, and we'll give you promotional opportunities, and we'll give you a good culture here. It's a parent-child relationship. I'm going to treat you as a good parent. And then what we end up happening is the partnering relationship says we clarify expectations and mutual agreements to each other. We create value and deliver agree upon results. We keep your promises, keep learning and growing, take responsibility for your own security. In other words, I don't believe that it's an organization's job to give you security. We have to find security from within, but that means we have to grow up, and move from being a child to being an adult. And the managers have to step down from being a parent to being an adult. Clarify expectations, create a safe place to work in without job security, keep your promises, co-create with you and co-create a space for you to contribute and to grow. This is a partnering contract. It's very different than we're historically used to. A parental contract says that security comes from outside of yourself. Somebody's going to give that security to you, and it'll breed entitlement, and it'll breed blame. You wonder why we have so much blame in an organization is that when we get into a caretaking role, I'm going to take care of my employees, I'm going to look after them, I'm going to make it easy for them. What we'll end up with is a culture of blame, a culture of complaint, regression toward adolescence, become self-centered, and politics are paramount, versus a partnership relationship where security comes from within. It's safe and caring. There's ownership and personal responsibility, service over self-interest, high trust, energy and engagement, and minimal politics. I suspect that it'll be maybe a generation before we see our organizations collectively move to a partnering contract. It's historically inbred in us that this notion of a parent-child relationship. A parent relationship in the performance management process says it's a performance review. I'm going to evaluate you. I'm going to supervise you. Think about that. Who here wants to be evaluated and supervised? What right does anybody have to evaluate you and give you a score on your performance review? You can give yourself a score, or you can ask for input on, hey, how am I doing as a leader on a scale of 1 to 10 in certain areas? But to evaluate, if anything that you do to evaluate anybody, or anything that you do in an organization, just go home and do it with your significant other and see how it flies at home. Go home and evaluate your partner and see how that ends for you, right? It's about complaint, punishment, and avoidance. It's about fixing people. It's annual, and I'm going to hold you accountable, versus a partnership, which is two-way. It's an honest, respectful feedback, clear expectations, guidelines, support, and trust. Growth opportunity. There's clear consequences. You fit people instead of fix people. It's ongoing, and you hold each other accountable. This is what moves to a partnership. And you got to be willing, if you're really going to have a sustainable accountability process, be willing to make that shift. The final shift that we need to make sure we do is understand the difference between contribution and chores. This is my 2-year-old. She's now 28 years old, but this is Chandra. And we all, if you had kids in your life, nieces, nephews, your own kids, grandkids, you will understand that kids have an innate desire to want to contribute. You bring out a vacuum cleaner with a kid, they will, with a 2-year-old, they're going to want to ride that sucker. They want to help. You bake a cake with a 4-year-old in your house. They want to help. But what happens is we have that innate desire for contribution. And I'll tell you, if you want to raise unaccountable kids, here's what you do. Just do everything for them, or just give them chores to do. And yes, we have to have chores, but we also need to feel a sense that our presence makes a difference, that there's a link, there's a link between my contribution here and the overall purpose and cause of this organization. So what I mean by this is this: what in your life is calling you? When all the noise is silenced and the meeting's adjourned and the lists and the agendas laid aside, what still pulls on your soul? And the silence between your heartbeats hides a summons. Do you hear it? Name it if you must, or leave it forever nameless. but why pretend that it's not there? Now, what does this have to do with accountability? Accountability isn't just about meeting everybody's expectations. It's about sitting down with people and saying, what do you really want to contribute here? What is calling you? How can I support you with the cause that you might have in your life? Now, you've all seen this slide that anybody's heard me before. I talk about this ikigai. We all have gifts aligned with our passion, aligned with making the contribution to our organizations. Folks, you're not going to have accountability issues when people are aligned with that sweet spot, with their ikigai. When people are aligned. Now, maybe that alignment is at home. Maybe their sweet spot is at home, and this is a job, a tool. My premise is our work is a tool to create our reason for being. And we got to create if you're not accountable, you don't have a reason to be accountable. It's like, why would you if you want to go to the gym regularly, you better have a reason for getting yourself there. If you have a cause in your life and you got to stay healthy, that's going to get you motivated, to go to the gym. If you have a vision that says, I want to be, when I'm 80 years old, be able to get down on the floor and play with my grandkids. Now you got a reason to keep your body flexible. You got a reason to get to the yoga class, whatever. But you got to have a reason. And when you get people aligned with their true contribution in life, you're not going to have an issue with accountability. Now, maybe that contribution is away from work. We call that an avocation. If it's at work, we call that a vocation. Either way is fine, but you're helping people live their calling, no matter whether it's at work or not. Again, fit people, don't fix people. Find that sweet spot and grow that. You can't spend all your time in your sweet spot, but what you want to be doing is to be growing that. And that's the way you foster accountability, not again with a stick, but with an inspiration to say, let's help people find that. You don't need to change yourself. What you need to do is come home to yourself, and this changes everything. I know we all want people to change, but how is that working for you? It's a poor investment of time to try to change people. What we want to do is to find people's gift, and maybe it means we need to help them move on. There's no place for you here. And that doesn't mean that we're disrespecting you. In fact, that's the height of respect, to say, we can't find a fit for you here. And so we're going to help you move on to a different career, a different job, a different organization. But that doesn't mean we're trying to change people. It means that we're being honest with people. Picasso said this, I wake up depressed every day. I start painting and the depression lifts. What do you have to do every day to lift that? And that's where you will find your heart of accountability. Nobody had to tell Picasso to be accountable around getting the paintings done, because he was doing something that was contributing his cause. I'm going to show you a little video. And Gord, I hope you stick around afterwards, because this guy has a heart of gold. He sent me this video a couple of weeks, and I'm going to throw this video in here because it speaks. I'd like you to watch this video through the eyes of being a leader, and what it means to find people's gifts and fit people in their gifts. Enjoy it.
I have a lot of memories from when I was a child. One that's always stuck out to me, though, was when I was about 10 years old, and I was in school, and I struggled. And I didn't struggle with English, math, or science. I struggled holding still. And I would try to listen and focus and process ideas, but I couldn't help myself. And to be honest, I would sit there and then I would just start tapping. And the students in the class would look at me and they'd say, hey, stop tapping. A lot of the time, I didn't even realize I was doing it. And then eventually even the teachers got after me and they would yell at me and they'd say, Clint, you have to stop tapping. It got so bad that I got sent to the principal's office for tapping. And he said to me, okay, maybe when you go back to class, just try sitting on your hands. And so I did. I went back to class, and when I felt myself starting to tap, I did this. I sat on my hands. And that worked for about 5 seconds. One time I was tapping in class, and my teacher, Mr. Jensen, he looked at me and he yelled. And he said, Clint, stay after class. And I thought to myself, this is it. I am done. Now, I've always been the type of person that believes that a single moment in time can change a person's life. And this was one of those moments for me, and I will never forget it. And so I was sitting there with Mr. Jensen and an empty classroom. And he walked past me and he sat next to his desk and he said, "Clint, come here, I want to talk to you." And as he looked me right in the eye, he said, "Now, I need you to know something, you're not in trouble, but I do have just one question that I have to ask you." And he asked, he said, "Have you ever thought about playing the drums?" And in that moment, Mr. Jensen, he leaned back and he opened the top drawer of his desk. And he reached in and he pulled out my very first pair of drumsticks. And he held them in his hands and he looked at me and he said, "Hey, Clint, you're not a problem. I think you're a drummer." That moment on, I've never put those sticks down. I've toured, recorded, and played drums all over the world. My whole college education was paid for with drumsticks in my hand. Just because of a single moment in time when somebody believed in me and he saw something in me that I didn't even see within myself. And from that moment, I learned that there's a difference between being the best in the world and being the best for the world.
I love that. I love that. Stop and reflect on what your gifts are. And our gifts are hard to find because they're so close to us. We don't see them. But this is the work of a leader. And what if we could reframe accountability to say we're gift finders? And within that gift, we won't be struggling so much with accountability. I have a theory that I'm going to offer for your consideration, that if we were all aligned with our gifts, maybe that list of 50 reasons why we don't see accountability in the world, maybe we would see that significantly decline. That maybe we're so out of touch with our gifts that what we're doing is walking around trying to please the world or trying to just keep up instead of living our life in alignment with how it's meant to be lived. And maybe we wouldn't have so much accountability problems if people connected more fully with their gifts. That's my theory that I will share with you. Now, at the same time, I want to move to my third step, which is my third point, where we have to still have a process for building accountability. This is a process. It's not the only process. It's the process that we've been developing and working for a number of years. It starts with a business focus statement where people individually go back. And not everybody's going to be interested. Some people just want a job description and just tell me what activities I have to do. They're not the leaders in an organization. They just are the good citizens. But people who want to really develop themselves and grow, this is a tool to help them with that, where you have a business focus statement, where you have what's your business within your business, operational accountabilities, brief, clear statements of the business or results you're promising to deliver, leadership accountability, the work environment you promise to create to make exceptional performance here, support requirements, what do you need from others, goals, sustainability plan, how will we keep your agreements up to date, and consequences, the outcome of delivering on your agreements. And what I'm going to suggest, and again, we could dive into this in much more detail. I'm happy to stay afterwards and we can talk more about this. But basically, your business focus statement is your paddock that says, this is the business that I'm in. You create a business you're an entrepreneur within the business. And just like you would, and then if for some reason or other you move on, you've already got this business defined for yourself that's aligned. And it's aligned with, and by the way, we're so accustomed to time clocks. Now, I realize some people have businesses where you have to be there at a certain time to meet a client's or a customer's or a patient's need. No problem. But many people don't need to work with a time clock. It's just ingrained in us so deeply that what this does is it offers a value proposition to say, this is the area that I'm accountable for. And ultimately, your boss stays out of managing what's in your area. You define your area of accountability and you negotiate what that area is, but then that is my business within the business. And you can bring your calling into that, where the world's need meets the soul's desire. This is what I'm really passionate about. And this is what I'm going to bring to the organization. And then you go through each of these steps to say, and this is a 2-page document or even a 1-page document that you begin to craft for yourself. And then the alignment process is that you sit with your team and you each have a document like this, and that you explore where there's gaps and overlaps, and you make an agreement for interdependence and mutual support requirements. And so that you begin to understand when you send an email and you require something, what does it mean to keep those promises? And you have those agreements with each other, and you revise your accountability and realign your agreements with the circumstances as they change, and that you keep that dialogue going with your team. Okay. My final point, and we can talk, the alignment process and the accountability process is practical, but I'm sure there's going to be questions that come up for it. And my last point that I just want to leave you with is you got to make today matter. You know, I have a little reading book every day that I refer to. It's called 24 Hours. It's kind of my perspective, and it's all just on the notion of what's the next 24 hours, and that's all we really have in life. This is where life is lived. And there's a Sanskrit proverb at the beginning of the book. Look to this day, for it is life, the very life of life. In its brief course lie all the realities and the verities of existence, the bliss of growth, the splendor of action, the glory of power. For yesterday is but a dream, and today is only a vision. But tomorrow is only a vision. But today well lived makes every yesterday a dream of happiness, and every tomorrow a vision of hope. Look well, therefore, to this day. Make folks today matter. You've all, for those of you who have heard me speak, this is my wall of influence. These are the 25 most influential people in my life, and I've been crafting this wall since my brother's death 6 years ago. These are the people who have made me who I am today. And you know what I've learned about every single one of those people? How you show up matters. How you show up in the world matters. Don't think for a minute that you can go in this world unnoticed. What you do makes a difference. Your attitude and your perspective on life. These are 5 promises I make to myself every day. I will tell you there are integrity gaps. I don't do it every day, but these 5 promises line up on my little sticky on the side of my computer here. Stay in my sphere of influence. These are aspirational more than descriptive, so they inspire me. And this is where the power lies, when I make agreements to myself and promises to myself. Stay in your sphere of influence. Let go of stuff you can't change. Don't waste your energy on trying to worry about stuff that you can't change. Focus on the stuff that you can make a difference. Be a contributor, not a consumer. We live in a consumer society. Look up consumer in the dictionary. You'll find using up, taking. Be a giver, not a taker. This is my way to bring light into the darkness of the world. Be a light. Bring a light to the darkness. It's the only way you're going to get rid of darkness is to bring a light. Do something that's going to make me stronger. You got to have a reason to be stronger. But physically, mentally, spiritually, I do something every day to make me stronger. It doesn't have to be spectacular, but I got to keep my roots developed deeply. And so I do something every day to keep that stronger. And stay curious, persist in self-awareness, everything. I'm in a project right now with this nonprofit group that I'm the board chair of. And what I'm beginning to realize is that there's a lot of my old beliefs and my old habits are getting in the way of being a useful leader. And I'm having to look at myself, and it's painful, but I'm continually curious and continually growing. And I've made some mistakes, but I'm learning. And that's what else are we going to do with our life? What's the purpose of life if we're not growing and learning and contributing and giving back? My last point here is that have always been inspired by Nelson Mandela. And the one thing when he left prison, he said, let's forgive. Let's forgive. Now, forgiveness, this is about this curiosity about really understanding your life. This is not a Sunday school platitude that you forgive somebody for the sake of being obedient or being a nice person. This took him 27 years of being unjustly in prison to where he looked deeply within his soul to where he could let go. And he had a powerful statement in his prison cell. As I walked out the door toward the gate that would lead to my freedom, I knew that if I didn't leave my bitterness and my hatred behind, I'd still be in prison. If we do nothing else but look at our past and begin to be curious about what do we need to let go of, because that will block us from being the inspiration to be accountable if we're carrying around stuff from our past. Folks, I want to share. This is not work for cynics and pessimists. This is work for people who hold on to dreams that are not going to be realized in their lifetimes. If you're working on something that can be accomplished in your lifetime, you're not thinking big enough. I hope I've given you something today to have you think bigger, but also start smaller on today, but think bigger, to inspire you to be more of who you are through the power of accountability. This is my purpose and my mission in life, is that we have a more authentic, accountable world, one person at a time. Folks, if you need anything, if there's any way that we can support you on this journey, we know you can do this on your own, but if you need any support along the way, please reach out to Marg. Marg will be putting her email address and my contact information. I think all of you know how to reach me on my website. Our next webinar is going to actually be a fundraiser for the town of Jasper for the horrific fire that they went through last year. If you're interested, the description of that is on my website. It'll be the webinar will be Trauma, Loss, and Recovery, the Long Road Home. And I hope that you will join me for that. Now, at this point, this is when I turn off the recorder, and we will be